Alright guys, Kremp again today. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Following a respectable result in Dallas for OpTic Texas, finally getting a championship Sunday appearance on the board. They still went down to Los Angeles, Thieves the eventual champions on that first match day of the Sunday. Coach Khan reveals what the situation was in the camp after that defeat, saying the vibes were still relatively high, obviously not where OpTic want to be, but recognising that losing to Thieves right now is not too much of a big deal, given they've still got a few weeks to go until the World Championship. Very much enjoy your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Just to quickly look back on, of course, Attach's career, the legendary 1v3 running through the artillery. I'm sure you guys know about that one. And there were some other great tweets about it yesterday, really. We obviously talked about Attach's retirement, kind of a pivotal moment maybe in the history of competitive esports. Obviously not just for Attach and all the things that he accomplished, but also looking at the fact that, you know, pretty much all of these guys are now retired. Only Slasher really is the only one remaining. At least there was a handful maybe until only the last few days. Even looking back at this image from, I mean, yeah, well, this is Ghost, right? Because we've got Nadeshot, Clay, Scump, and Proofy on the same roster. But if you look at all these legendary names, the only one on here who is still competing at this point, Slasher was kind of having his come up, but the only one still competing is Formal, and he's not even competing in COD. Aches, Krim, TP, Karma, Merc, Parasite, Nameless, Study. Obviously, some of these guys are now commentators or still content creators in the scene. I mean, that Envy team, look at that, right? Parasite, of course, on the flank. Merc and Study are now casters, Nameless on the desk. So, you know, some of these guys are doing various things. Scump, Proof, Nature, and Clay, what a team that was. JCap Replays, of course, now known as Crowder, right? Coaching the FaZe team. Classic and Theory. Muddog, Miyagi, Attach, and Croster was a team. That was the couple of Curse teams back in the day with Burns, Machilla, Enable, and Tipsy. Doug, Sates, Formal, and Dina. I mean, look, man, these are great names and just great days. I don't know. I know Burns was talking about this and saying, like, it feels like an honor to be able to play in this type of an era where these were the top teams. Bose, Killer, Miracles, and Ricky on the OpTic Nation roster. Sharp, Goonjar, Apathy, and Neslo. That was one of the teams of all time. And then the Strictly Business roster, as you guys can see on the last-hand side, featuring Zinni, Spacely, John, and Stainville. So just a bit of a look back at COD past there. The fact that all of these names, though, now, and obviously Formal's playing Halo, but all of these names are now officially retired as of the last couple of days. This is a big update as well for you guys. So I heard about this actually just when I got to Dallas, that the Esports World Cup last year, as you might expect, they've got a fair bit of money and they've decided that they are going to, well, they did last year and they will, I imagine, maybe this year again, record a docu-series about it. Now, it's going to air on Prime Video on the 6th of June. Now, I'm not exactly sure what the plan is here, but it does feature a story on Drazah. Now, I don't know whether the Drazah feature is kind of integrated into one of the episodes, as in the episodes cover multiple stories and Drazah is part of one episode, or whether there's a whole episode on Drazah's story. But, you know, I think it's a really interesting one because, of course, they went on to win the tournament last year out there in Riyadh. And of all the players on FaZe, okay, it could have been interesting for any number of those guys, but I think Drazah, you know, interesting personality, an interesting story as well, certainly coming out of Alaska. You know, I don't know if they followed him over there to record any footage, but, you know, they probably had the money to do so if they really wanted to. So I think a pretty cool storyline to keep your eyes on here, right? I'm not sure exactly when the Drazah episode is going to air, but the idea of kind of getting to see some of those stories in action, and it should be a pretty damn good one at that as well, I would imagine. Now, Los Angeles Guerrillas, talking of the Esports World Cup, we don't really know what these teams are going to do. Now, firstly, it must be noted that LAG have officially said their final goodbyes, really. So, because at the World Championship, they're not going to be there, and at the World Cup, it's not going to be LAG, it's just going to be Gentlemates, and then next year, Los Angeles Guerrillas are gone. So, they should be officially done and dusted. Now, they had an analyst who is now a free agent for Champs and EWC. So things are changing. I will say there was this tweet the other day on the 26th of May where Johnny said, just wanted to shout out my teammates and especially my coaching staff, Drill and Marky B. They get a lot of hate because of the team's performance, but I have to say they're the hardest working coaches I've ever had and really helped me improve a ton while I was on the team. So, look, I don't know, when I first read this, I was like, while I was on the team sounds almost kind of final, almost sounds like he's not going to be there anymore. But, you know, according to his bio and everything, he's got gentlemates. It still says gentlemates. I don't know what you guys think about that in the comments below. But it kind of implies that he's no longer there. So, like, my opinion is, and my expectation is, quite frankly, that probably this organisation will blow it up going into the World Cup. I mean, they've got some time to do so, assuming that they can. I'm pretty sure they can. The teams that go to champs, they're going to take the same roster into the World Cup. 99% sure. I doubt they can make any changes after that. The teams that bombed out today surely should be able to make changes. Don't know how easy it's going to be, but I wouldn't be surprised if they could. And, well, frankly, they should. As we know, some of these rosters. This was pretty cool as well. It's an interesting league we have today because there used to be more British players in the league, but now we have a really widespread league that is still the majority American, obviously. So 32 US players, US-born players, 4 from Spain, the Heretics roster. The 3 Englishmen are Insight, Beans, and Nastie, I guess, right? The Frenchman is HyDra. Notably, the Belgian is not, well, French, right? Because people think that Abuzah is French because he speaks French and his surname is Francois, which is all fair enough, but he is Belgian. This, of course, is Dashy, the only remaining Canadian pro. Pretty interesting, because a few years ago, there used to be, you know, quite a few Canadians. You had Asim, you had Gunless, of course, Karma was in the league, and there was a few others as well. But now that's, you know, Royalty, for example, Goonjar, we mentioned, all Canadians. As far as I'm aware, you know, plenty of other examples too, I'm sure. CleanX is Danish. Of course, Pred Australian, Cammy is Scottish, Snoopy Mexican, Exnid from Saudi Arabia, and then Huke is from the Netherlands, or at least like that's the country that he's considered to have been brought up in, and that's the flag that he goes by. So pretty interesting in the sense that because Huke was also born in Saudi Arabia, so if he decided to go by that flag, then actually Saudi would be this, you know, one of the most represented countries in the league, which is pretty interesting. Of course, it was at the start of the season, but then that relatively swiftly went away. As Dashy says, last one standing, hashtag True North with the Canadian flag. Now, what was pretty funny is that Kremp in the replies was like, because this whole True North thing, it's always a bit of a talking point because I think London is actually further north in terms of latitudes than like Ontario is, where Dashy's from. But due to the jet stream and other factors, it's actually more temperate here than it is certainly the north of Canada. But as Kremp says, because it's also true that a lot of Canadians, like half of Canadians, live, I don't know, below Washington or something in the US, just because the way the geography works, it's not like it really matters. But Kremp's getting into it and says, what latitude did you grow up in? Let's find out who's more north. And, you know, Ottawa's only 45 degrees north. I think London's like 51 degrees north or something. And Kremp says that he grew up here, it was 48 degrees north. So really this whole True North discussion, it was always the talking point a few years ago. People have said, oh, King's the North, is it Toronto, is it Minnesota? But actually it should have been London, because technically, but whatever, nobody cares about that anymore. London as an organisation are long gone to Charlotte, and hopefully relatively soon are completely gone entirely. Now, OpTic Texas, they had a better weekend. If the bracket had fallen differently, maybe they'd have played Heretics, and I'd love to see how that got on. At the end of the day, they lost to the 2 best teams, and the manner in which they lost was relatively competitive. Now, things are changing. For the World Championship, they will be running the new patch. Now, they were going to bring this in. They actually played on it for a few days, and then they reverted it because the Codcaster was completely broken. It was literally unwatchable. So the league decided, okay, we're going to have to play on the old one still. And the question then turns to, okay, what are you going to do for champs? Because you played the last couple of months on this very old patch. For champs, are you going to say, well, we probably should stick with the same thing, or are they going to change it? But they are going to play on the new patch for the World Championship. This is interesting. The Jackal is nerfed, but they are bringing back the long barrel on it, and no muzzle potentially on the AR. So there's some ideas that pros have here to potentially resolve this situation and make it still as balanced as maybe it has been recently. But the new controlled spawns are a big one. Certainly some maps are going to play rather differently to before. Whether that's going to be beneficial or, you know, disadvantageous to a team like Thieves, that maybe is the big question. They've just won the last 2 events. There's going to be a new patch for the World Championship. Their best game mode is their control, and the spawns may, you know, they could make it more punishing for the, you know, the worst team, I suppose, on the bad side of things, but equally it could also just change things up, where Thieves have been very strong at this point for several months. So maybe opens the door, because whenever a patch changes, it does open the door for a team to potentially catch up to some of their rivals. Now, Karma was talking about what happened after they lost to Thieves. This, of course, is the grand finals here. They're watching in the background. FaZe are playing Los Angeles Thieves. Thieves went on to win the series 4-2, as we know. But after OpTic lost to the Thieves on the first match of that day, they seem to be in relatively good spirits. There was a bit of a talk about this clip that I saw here, which, of course, CDL Central was going around with, where you can see the OpTic guys are fist bumping the boys. Of course, we know that Dashy and, Scrappy, they get along reasonably well. We can see at the end here that, Dashy and Scrappy clearly exchange a couple of words. Dashy said something to him. He turned around and then, kind of pointed at him or whatever. And then Scrap was obviously laughing as he walked away. And Dashy, as you guys can see on the right hand side, he also had a bit of a grin on his face as well. So I know there were some people looking at this saying, oh, you can't do this. If you lose a series, you've got to look really solemn and all that. Like, who knows, maybe it was something funny that happened in the game. The reality is, I don't really think that OpTic expected to win this series. Thieves were the best team, they are the best team, and that's how it seemed this weekend as well. And OpTic put up a pretty good fight. Of course, the map 4 for Dashy especially was challenging. But Karma does say that actually after the fact, the, vibes on the team were still pretty high. And, some may argue that's either for good or for bad.
I mean, it was good to be honest. I thought it was going to be terrible, to be honest.
Good vibes?
I thought it was going to really miserable.
I mean, yeah, you just lose.
They were laughing. They were having a good time. Brandon wouldn't shut the f*** up.
Really?
He was just talking about everything. He was like, I'm not smiling. I'm not smiling. He just kept saying, I'm not smiling.
Did he start smiling?
But we're all smiling.
So what do you guys think about these comments? Right? I don't think Karma's necessarily intending to criticize anyone, but obviously some people have read it that way to say, hi, he's talking, wow, Dashy won't stop talking. They should be talking about other stuff. Look, at the end of the day, Karma is the coach of the team. Whatever he wants to put up publicly, he must feel like is in the best interest of the team to do so. And at the end of the day, if OpTic are relatively, you're never going to be satisfied with the defeat, right? But losing in that manner, getting the result they did, I don't think they should be too upset about it. And it doesn't seem like they were or they are. Now, you could debate that, because when we saw Thieves lose, let's say at Major, like Thieves lost at Major 2 Dallas, they came top 4. Now, sure, their expectations were higher than they placed, but they were not happy at all. And they had like a big, deep team conversation where they talked about, okay, how do we get from here to winning championships? They've now done that twice in a row. So there's obviously going to be some debate on these type of comments. Intrigued to your thoughts as always in the comment section below. Just a couple of final things. The tournament streak of KD continues. Players with a 1 or more KD in tournaments. The record continues for Cellium. He's up to 28 in a row. But HyDra is at 26 such tournaments in a row, which is pretty remarkable because he's played 26 tournaments in his career. He's never had a negative event. So Scump's record on this, by the way, is I think 45, 44, maybe 44, 45, something like that. So that's the number they're shooting for. Career COD Chump's average placement. Simp, Illy, Pred actually is right up there, interestingly enough, as well, as is Shotzzy. And as you tend to see with these type of numbers, the cream does tend to rise to the top when it comes to the big one of the season. But very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.